Welcome back to the deep dive. You hand us the sources, and we deliver the insights.
And today, we're really getting into a challenge that I think defines so much of modern life.
It really does. How do you balance that, relentless action with the quiet you need to stay sane?
Exactly.
So today is a deep dive into some ancient spiritual texts that are all about healing, service, and crucially, about listening. It's about finding the root of your strength when the world just keeps screaming for your attention.
And that tension is, well, that's our mission today. We're synthesizing excerpts from a whole set of readings from the Old and New Testament, Psalms, all of it.
And the goal?
The goal is to show you a kind of blueprint for avoiding burnout. We're looking at how intense service, real mission-driven work, it has to be fueled by intentional withdrawal, by careful listening. It's the difference between just reacting and acting with real purpose.
A blueprint. I like that. So let's unpack it. We've got three main dynamics to look at.
That's right.
We're going to start with the sheer volume of it all. Jesus's immediate, intense healing ministry. Just, the feeling of being completely overwhelmed.
Then we pivot.
Right. To his radical, almost counterintuitive withdrawal to pray. That's the counter strategy.
And finally, we'll look at the foundational skill that makes any of that withdrawal actually work, learning how to hear a directive voice. And for that, we'll use the story of young Samuel.
Great. Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with the action. We're in the Gospel of Mark, and the scene is it's incredibly high intensity.
It really is. We're told that immediately after leaving the synagogue, Jesus walks straight into the house of Simon and Andrew. There's no break.
No downtime at all. Just one thing straight to the next.
And that immediacy is key. The very first thing that happens is a specific healing. Simon's mother-in-law, she's sick with a fever.
And what's fascinating to me is the physicality of it. It says he approached, grasped her hand, and helped her up.
Yes. But the really crucial part, the detail that tells you everything, is what happens next. The fever leaves her, and what does she do? She immediately served them.
Hold on a second. She just recovered from a debilitating fever. You'd think the first thing she'd do is rest. Isn't jumping straight into service just risking burnout all over again?
That's a fantastic question. It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But the source frames this power not just as, relief from suffering, but as a full restoration for capability.
So the healing isn't just for her, it's for the whole household.
Exactly. It suggests the deepest healing is what renews your capacity to contribute. Her ability to serve is actually the proof that the healing was total. She was restored, made whole again, so she could be an active part of the community.
Okay, so that one healing was just the start. That was the opening bell, really.
Oh, absolutely. Because as the sun set, the end of the workday for everyone, the floodgates just opened. The source says the whole town gathered right at the door.
The whole town.
Think of that door as, your modern email inbox just exploding. Or a waiting room that's overflowing with urgent needs.
Right.
They brought everyone, the ill, the possessed, and Jesus cured many and drove out many demons. It was an overwhelming, absolutely exhaustive effort. Just a complete depletion of energy.
And that kind of frantic service, I think, is something anyone struggling with endless demands can relate to.
It is, and it connects right back to the emotional core here. One of the supporting texts, Psalm 147, it kind of sums up the whole mission. It just says, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds.
The motivation is pure restoration, but you have to imagine the physical drain was just immense. And this is the pivot. This is where it gets really, really interesting for me. After an absolute marathon of ministry, clearing out the whole town's needs until late at night, what is the logical next step for recovery?
Sleep in, of course.
Sleep in, exactly. But that is not the blueprint we get here.
Not at all. It's the complete opposite. Despite that intense night, the text specifically says he rose very early before dawn.
Before dawn.
And instead of going back to the crowds, he went off to a deserted place where he prayed. This withdrawal, this radical choice to prioritize quiet, that's the necessary counterbalance to all that action.
I get the importance, I do. But let's be real for a second. How do you ignore an entire town gathered at your door demanding help?
It's so hard.
Simon and the others, they basically track him down and say, everyone is looking for you. The subtext is, the mission is failing without you right now.
And that tension, that's the critical takeaway. It's the immediate urgent demand versus the long-term strategic necessity. The insight from the commentaries is that service that isn't rooted in this kind of intentional quiet. It just becomes reactive.
It's just human effort.
It's human effort, and it leads to quick exhaustion. The act of withdrawal, it teaches dependence. It ensures the mission is driven by a deep purpose, not just by the loudest cry for help.
So the withdrawal isn't rest from the mission. It's calibration for the mission. He doesn't just go back to the same spot and do the same thing.
Exactly. The quiet time informs the next step. When they find him, he redirects their focus. He says, "Let us go on to the nearby villages, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come."
Ah, so the purpose was clarified.
The prayer period clarified the strategic objective.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't just go back to putting out fires. He deliberately expanded the scope of the mission, but with a renewed purpose that came directly from that quiet connection. He shifted from, urgent local problems to a strategic regional campaign.
Okay, so shifting from the need for that withdrawal, let's talk about the skill set you need to make it actually useful.
Right.
Because if you're burnt out and seeking clarity, you need direction. But what if you've never learned how to recognize that direction when it comes?
That takes us all the way back to the Old Testament, to the profound and almost comical story of Samuel in the temple.
We have to set the stage here because the texts are very clear. During this time, revelation from the divine was uncommon and vision infrequent.
They were in a spiritually quiet era, which makes clear communication even harder to find.
And Samuel is the perfect stand-in for anyone who feels totally unprepared. He's just a youth. He's sleeping right near the holiest spot on earth.
And this is so important, the text says he was not familiar with the Lord because the Lord had not revealed anything to him as yet. He just hasn't learned the language yet.
It's a perfect setup for confusion.
It is. So the Lord calls to Samuel. Samuel answers, "Here I am." But he completely misidentifies the source.
He runs to Eli, the old priest he serves. He thinks Eli called him.
Right. And Eli is old, his eyes are weak, and he says, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed."
And this happens, 3 times?
3 times, yeah. Can you imagine being Eli? You're just trying to sleep, and this bewildered kid keeps running in, totally confused.
It's the definition of spiritual miscommunication.
It really is. And it's so relatable. It took 3 mistaken calls for Eli, the veteran, to finally, connect the dots. He realizes, hold on, something bigger is happening here.
That's the hinge point.
It is. He gives Samuel the critical coaching, the specific instruction. He says, "Go to sleep, and if you are called, reply, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'"
That's the formula right there. Recognize the speaker and then declare a posture of receptivity. So what happens when Samuel finally does it right?
The Lord comes, reveals his presence, calls out again, and this time Samuel answers correctly. "Speak, for your servant is listening."
And that's the breakthrough.
It is. And that breakthrough in listening led directly to sustained effectiveness. Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and the texts say the Lord did not permit any word of his to be without effect. He became a recognized, effective prophet throughout all of Israel. That dedicated listening is the absolute precursor to having long-term impact.
The power of that simple shift from just frantic service to this learned, receptive listening, it's so beautifully synthesized in Psalm 40, which is a major part of these source readings.
It really is.
And that central declaration, it's repeated, and it just summarizes the whole dynamic. "Here am I, Lord, I come to do your will."
And the psalm identifies the priority for anyone who's seeking that kind of sustained impact. It says the successful person, they waited. They waited intentionally for the Lord who stooped toward me and heard my cry.
So patience comes first?
Patience and trust. The text suggests the virtuous person is the one who places their trust in the source of direction and turns not to those who stray after falsehood. You have to trust the voice you've learned to hear.
What I find so striking is the language. The psalm elevates your posture, your attitude over mere ritual.
Yes.
It draws this sharp contrast. Sacrifice or offering you wish not, but ears open to obedience you gave me. It's not about the ritual, it's about the listening.
The deeper principle is doing what's directed, not just doing what's traditional or, what's easy. The source of strength wanted a receptive heart. It wanted the ears open to obedience.
And the final declaration is just so powerful.
It is. "To do your will, O my God, is my delight, and your law is within my heart." This internal commitment, this delight in following direction, that's what flows out into effective external action, like, announcing justice, which is just another way of saying public strategic service.
It brings us completely full circle. You can't obey the mission if you haven't heard the command.
And you can't serve effectively without prioritizing that connection to the source of the mission.
And it's reaffirmed in another text from John, "My sheep hear my voice, says the Lord. I know them and they follow me."
There it is again.
Recognition of the voice is the prerequisite for all strategic action.
So if we pull all this back and summarize the key takeaway for you, the listener, what these sources present is a really clear framework for sustained effectiveness. It doesn't matter if you run a company or manage a household.
Right. It's a universal principle.
It is. And this effectiveness is rooted not in physical exhaustion or just frantic activity, but in intentional withdrawal, in strategic prayer, and dedicated listening.
Action and contemplation.
They're inseparable. Service and discerning direction. They're two sides of the same coin for a life dedicated to a successful mission.
It really is a hugely practical lesson. Yeah. And it's what separates those who, succeed for a season from those who build something that actually lasts.
That's a great way to put it.
You have to first learn to recognize the clear call, the direction, just like Samuel finally did with Eli's help. And then you have to deliberately carve out that time for quiet connection, balancing the intense service with the withdrawal, just like Jesus did when he ignored the crowd at the door to prepare for the next phase.
It's a direct challenge to the modern idea that productivity just means constant motion. These sources suggest the greatest effectiveness actually comes from pausing, from making sure your work flows from a strategic, renewed position.
You shift from reactive exhaustion
to strategic clarity.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. It's really a question for strategic reflection. How can you make time today for intentional silence so that your next action, whether it's at work, in your community, or at home, flows from a deep, renewed relationship with the source of your strength, rather than just from anxiety or from the urgent demands of others?